Good morning. Nice to see you guys today. You know, we are in, and by the way, to all the students, have a good one. Nice to have you guys with us. Good to have you joining us today. Yeah, it feels very fitting. We're in a series where we're looking at this idea of the whole picture, and basically it's this idea of a church needs older and younger because there's something important that we want to accomplish in the world, and that every generation's empowered and every generation is needed to be a part of that. And whenever we become a church where we're all active based on an older generation, or the only people who are active in it are the younger generation, you end up becoming one note and you start to miss just this whole picture that the kingdom of God is actually for the whole world, for all people, for all ages, for all spaces and places, and all of the things that come with that. It's a really big deal. We have to remember that the church, right, isn't just this thing that essentially we attend each week. The church is a vehicle. The church is gathered, and the reason for the formation of the church is because Christ actually had a mission to take things not just to the disciples and a group of people in a small room in the first century, but ultimately to the whole world. Matthew chapter 28, one of the last things that Jesus says to his disciples before they go and they create what will become the church is he says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." And what he's basically saying is, like, I get that you're now a part of the church, but the church doesn't end with you. It keeps going. In fact, now you're a part of reaching people, and there's a whole movement, a whole mission, and it takes all of us to accomplish that. That's really the whole picture. And so last week, Stacy got to talk about this idea about how younger people need older people, right? Because she was addressing this idea of the older generations in our church. And she said, you know, younger people need older people who have weathered enough life and walked enough life to actually come alongside and say, hey, we've been here, we see you, we know what it's like to weather a storm. When the rest of us are freaking out, or when other people are freaking out and essentially saying, like, I don't know if this is gonna work out, isn't it nice when somebody comes along and they're like, so let me tell you about the storms in my life, and let me be a shoulder that tells you it's gonna be okay, and let me remind you of who God is in this moment, and walks that forward with you. That's what Stacy got to talk about last week. She talked to the older group individuals among us. And today, I get the privilege of talking to the younger generations, the younger individuals among us. And here's the deal. You might be sitting here wondering, we had to do this last week too, so am I older or am I younger? I'm not gonna be the one who draws that line. That's not safe, right? So here's what I'm gonna tell you. It depends on the room you're in. I need you to know this. Like I have for a long time around here thought of myself as a young guy at Casas. You should go with me into the youth room where they all refer to me as the old guy. Right? They do. They refer to me as, oh, the old guy's coming to camp to talk again. That's awesome. And I've just gotten used to it. I wear the uniform. This is what we do, right? And so what I would say is it depends on the room that you're in. It depends on how you see yourself. I'll let you define that for yourself. Maybe you see yourself as a part of the younger generations in the church. Maybe you see yourself as a part of older generations. What I can tell you is that I'm going to speak to the younger generations today, but I do believe that everything I'm going to talk about in this message today is for all of us and matters for all of us here today. And so to the younger generations, I just want you to know, I'm so thankful that you're here. I'm so thankful because you are the church. And we don't always tell people this, and it's weird because growing up in a church, it can often feel like I attend a church because we get in a car, my parents take me here and they make me wear certain things and they make me act certain ways. And even if we were fighting, the moment we get out of the car, we all have to be like smiling and church, you know, that's what we do. And yet, regardless of what your experience growing up has looked like, the truth of the matter is that you actually don't attend a church. You are the church. This building could be gone. This campus could be gone a week from now. It could all in some crazy, chaotic moment disappear. And it wouldn't change the fact that the church very much still exists because it's you. It's all of us. The church is a group of people who've been so transformed by the love of Jesus Christ that what we've said is, I want this in my life. I want to bring this to the life of others, and we want to be something gathered together where we can do more with one another than we could ever do alone. Let's take this unto the ends of the earth, and let's love people forward. Let's love people in the love of Christ just like he loved us. That's what the church is. It's a vehicle. And if you are a younger generation, you are the church. And do you want to know what's crazy? And it makes you different than the older generations among us. What's crazy is the older generations will not be here to lead the next generation of church. The older generations will not be the ones who lead and guide the next generation of people who come to follow Christ and the next generation of people who need the love of Jesus in this world. You will. Isn't that crazy? You will. And I know we don't like to think about that because it's like, well, that feels like a lot of pressure, right? If I were to say that to either my 2 teenage daughters, they would look at me and be like, so we're just trying to get through high school and you just told me I'm supposed to be a part of leading a church for the future, and like, oh my gosh, that feels like a lot of pressure. And it can be, but I'm not trying to add it like a ton of pressure. It's just true. Because you are the church and because of what Christ is uniquely doing in you and through you, you will be the generation of people who lead this thing out, who reach the next group of people. You will be the expression. You'll be the group of people who fall in love with Jesus all over again and become that unique expression of what it means for your generation and for what it means for your season and your time to actually keep being this vibrant, living expression of the love of Jesus Christ, to keep being something powerful. That's you. If you're a part of the younger generation, 20, 30 years from now, it's you. And so that's what I want to do. I want to spend some time today talking about 2 things that a future church, right? Imagining that church like 20, 30 years from now, that a future church really needs from a younger generation. And I have to be really candid with you. Most of the time, I want you to know that most of the time when people go to have a conversation like this or to talk about these things, it's always an older generation who's going, you want to know what the younger generation needs to do to shape up? That kind of idea. It is. And if you're an older generation and you're offended, don't be. Your parents did that to you too, right? It's amazing. Go back and look at dialogue for like hundreds of years. And what you're going to find is that every generation has looked at the next generation and being like, these guys are slackers. They don't have what it takes. Every generation has always looked back at the next generation and essentially said, these guys don't have enough gumption, or if they could be more like us. And that's really what's being said there. You know what's wrong with this next generation? It's that they're not us. Which is a strange thing to tell the next generation, but it's what your parents told you, and it's what their parents told them, and it's what their parents told them, and we're human beings who like to repeat the process. So today, that's not this. What I don't have is a moment where I'm going to say, like, do better, rise the occasion, or else, like, or you need to shape up. It's not that. In fact, I don't have any of that. To the younger Christians among us, can I just tell you, and I'll speak on behalf of all of us, I love your perspective. We love your perspective. And here's why. So many of us have been doing the same thing for so long that we don't even realize that it's weird sometimes. It's kind of like our houses. Some of you guys live in a house where you have a drawer that doesn't open right and you have to like turn it, push it to the side and pull out, or it gets stuck because you've just gotten so used to the fact that it's broken or it doesn't work that you're like, no, this is how you open it. Now you don't even think about it. Invite somebody new to your home who's never been there before, and they go grab the drawer and they're going to go, and then they're going to look at you and they're not going to go, oh, pull it to the side and open it. That's normal. They're going to go, why is it like this? And then they're going to look at you and go, we should fix it. We should actually change that. Because they haven't been living with it for so long that they've just gotten used to it. They actually have a fresh set of eyes. They have a fresh set of perspective to look at something and be like, but should we though? And is this really okay? And I love that younger generations bring this. Every generation gets to bring this. Younger generations bring this to the church. And they get to walk in and go, I know, I'm seeing you guys do this stuff and you're all acting like it's normal because you've been doing it for a really long time. Like, but should we though? And is this really what Christ is doing amidst us and among us right now? And I bet we can fix some things. To the younger generation among us, I love your audacity. I love the fact that you still believe we can change things because we can. God can. You know, that's something that I think older generations at times remember like a theology and forget like a real life. And we're like, God can do anything. He can change anything, but this will stay the same forever. And younger generations, we actually believe, like you guys actually believe. No, the God of the universe is big enough to reach into the midst of our existence and change things. And to move in our hearts and in our spirits and to move in our culture. And we got to figure it out and we got to do this. And I love that energy and I love that perspective. Churches need that. We need that. And I'm glad you're here. And can I tell you, one of the things I love about you is that you're looking for something real. What I hear so much from younger generations is not, I just want to go to church and do the same thing on Sunday, repeat, eat, sleep, repeat, and do that over and over again. What I keep hearing from younger generations is, I don't want to do that. If this doesn't matter for my life, I don't want to be a part of it. So I want something real. And I want something that actually matters. I want something that actually resonates in my life. And I want something that's big enough not just to be a club for me, but something that changes the world in me and around me. I want something real and powerful and good. And I hear that from younger generations. And I would say, don't lose that. That's big. And it is important. And we believe that God is moving in you. We believe that God is moving through you. And I believe that there's a uniqueness that you will bring to this world and that you bring to this life and that you bring to your own life because of who Christ uniquely is in you. Because you're experiencing things as a generation in ways that I simply will not and that others simply will not. And all of that shaping and all of that growing makes you, you, and God is in it and through it. And we couldn't be more grateful to be with you and to have you as a part of this church. I'm so glad that you're here because you are a part of the whole picture. And you will be leading the church of the future in 20 to 30 years or however long, depending on how old you are or how you see yourself or whatever it is. So let's jump in. There's two challenges that I want to put in front of us. This is something that I think the future church really needs from a younger generation. And it's important. And what you're going to find is it actually needs it from all of us as we go to talk about this today. And here's the first. The future church needs a younger generation of people who choose to emulate Jesus. Future church needs a younger generation of people who choose to emulate Jesus. That word emulate, if it's not a word we use all the time, think of it as to copy, or think of it as this. I want my life to look like Christ's life. I want who I am to start to look more and more like the person of Jesus. I want my heart to become more and more like the heart of Christ in this world, the way he sees people, the way he moved about in this world. I want to move about that same way. I want to be that same thing, to emulate, to copy, to take on Jesus. Right now, I want you to do something, and this is kind of fun for some of us and really hard for others. I want you to imagine, do your best to imagine the church 30 years from now. And if you're like, well, that should be easy. It'll be just like it is now. If you have perspective to look back 30 years, is the church you're in now and the way you operate and see it, does it feel like the church from 30 years ago to you? Or does it feel a little different? In some ways, we're doing the same things, right? But in other ways, it can feel really different, or the flavor can feel different, or the things we're wrestling with or tackling can feel really, really different. If 30 years is too far to think ahead, think 20 years, or whatever you're capable of. But what's that future look like? What will we care about? What will we not care about? When people look at us, what will they see? What will they not see? What will the church look like? And let me tell you what I think. I have no idea. That's what I think. It's true. I don't know. But I do know one thing. And what I know is this. The church will look, in 30 years, the church will look like whoever it is that the church follows. That's what it will look like. Whoever it is that we choose to emulate, whoever it is that we choose to follow will determine how and who the church ultimately looks like. I have 2 teenage daughters in my house. I said this same way last hour. It sounds like I took them captive. I have 2 teenage daughters, and I just confessed. They live with me. They're my kids, and they've grown up there. They can leave whenever they want, in case you're curious. Right? I have 2 teenage daughters, and I'm their dad. It's a joy. More than any other time in my life, I can tell that we live in the era of the influencer. When I use that phrase, an influencer, like I want to be an influencer, if you know what that means, raise your hands. Okay, if you don't quite know what that means, it's okay, raise your hand. You're like, what's an influencer? Okay, a couple of us. Let me tell you. So an influencer is essentially somebody who, whether it's via social media, YouTube, I don't know, whatever means of influence that they have, usually digitally, right? They've gained a following of people, and now oftentimes those people push perspectives, products, recommendations, and things, and people will follow them, right? They have influence. That's how this goes. And so my daughters know the names of all kinds of influencers on YouTube and all kinds of influencers on social media that I don't even know they exist. I don't even know who many of these people are. In fact, they know those names as easily and as readily as I knew the name Michael Jordan or Madonna when I was growing up. It's like a household name. Right? Because these are people and this is what they do. And these people have an amazing kind of influence. In fact, my daughters will look and they'll model a lot of the things that they say or think or do after some of these people. And so here's a good example. Every day I take my kids to school, right? I drive them to high school. And so every day I wake up and I come walking out of my room and I'm all ready and they're all ready. And one of my daughters, not every day, but often will look at me and say, hey, Dad, how do you like my fit? Which means, hey, what do you think of this outfit? And I'll look and I'll say, it looks good. You look fine. Yeah, I think that's great. And then I'll just smile and be like, what do you think of my outfit? And I'll say that to them. And then they'll look and they'll be like, it's fine. You look like a dad. And they say it every time. I could change anything. I could wear anything I want, guys. And I walk out and apparently it's the same uniform no matter what I try. It's just what it is. They're like, you look like a dad. And I'm like, thanks. Good to see you again. Another day. Let's do this. right? And then they'll look and they'll be like, I'm glad you like this because like these jeans are really on trend right now, right? Which means like these are great. And I'm like, why are they on trend? Who told you that? Like, where did you learn this? And they'll say, well, this person or this influencer, and they start to name these people that they follow, that they emulate. And they'll say that because this is what's cool. This is what's in. And you start to look and I'll drop them off at high school and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's right. Everybody has the same pair of jeans on and that's what everybody's doing right now. I had a 10-minute conversation a week ago about the importance of a center part versus a side part. This is new information to me. I've never lived in this world, you guys. I literally was just like, it doesn't matter how you part your hair. Like, it's fine. And they both were like, yes, it does. Everybody who knows anything does a center part, Dad. And then my wife immediately was like, I do a side part. And they're like, we know. And then that happens. Yeah, some of you, I'm making you self-conscious. If you got a side part, good on you. You don't need to change anything. It just means you're not following the same people that they're following and doing the same things. And that's okay. You don't need to be self-conscious about that. But apparently it was a really big deal. For the first time I started to look around, I'm like, there are center parts everywhere. This is like a thing. And it's because at some point in time, somebody said, this is what you should do. And here's my new style. And they were like, that's amazing. And a bunch of people followed it and emulated it because they wanted their lives to look the same way. And it's not just the way we look, and it's not just the things we dress, it's the music we listen to, it is even the things that we say. If you're part of an older generation and you want to have a very confusing day, all you have to do is spend the rest of your day trying to figure out why every time I say the number 67, a group of people in here lose their minds. And try to figure out what it means. Go do that. It's crazy. But here's why people do this, is because at some point in time, somebody wrapped it, and then somebody on an influencer actually said it, and nobody knows why that's important, but we follow this person, and so we emulate it, and we do it, and now everybody is just looking this way and doing these things, and this is how this works, because we all follow somebody in some way. And if you're part of an older generation and you think I'm just giving the younger generation a hard time, it's you too. This is all of us, you guys. How many of you spent $20 on a Dubai chocolate bar because you saw something online that says you ought to? Yeah, you don't have to tell anybody. That's a lot of money, right? I hope it's worth it. And some of you were like, it absolutely was, and I would do it again. Like, because you did. How many of you are still dressing the way that you did 30 years ago? Yeah, we're not, are we? Actually, some of you are elbowing your spouse. There's a lot of gentlemen in here that I just got in trouble, I know, right? Yeah, and it's because there's a part of you that we look around us and we're like, maybe this should change. Maybe I should do this differently because we're all emulating somebody else. And this is also true. If I were to spend an hour with you in conversation and just listen to the things that you were saying and speaking to me, I will be able to tell which news station you watch. I will be able to tell who you vote for probably. And it's because at some point you'll begin parroting the various things that you see and that you watch and the opinions and the perspectives that you take in. This is what all of us do. If I spend an hour with you, I can tell usually how much time a person spends on Facebook and how many of the one-liners and things come from there. I can usually tell how much social media. I can usually tell which podcaster somebody starts to follow. And it's because, or which fitness guru, or whatever the author is, or any other thing. And it's because we start to emulate it. And we start to parrot it, and we start to model these things. This is every generation. This is all of us always, because there's something about what it is to be a human being where we're copying people. We're essentially emulating somebody else. This isn't new. It's not new at all, in fact. If you look at the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul's writing to a church where the people in the church are kind of going at each other at different times, and it's because there's two really prominent leaders. Paul was an amazing leader in helping start and move through that church. And then there's another guy who's come there who's a guy named Apollos. And Paul is this charismatic, larger leader, and he's compelling, and he's eloquent. When you translate the Greek of the New Testament and you look at Paul's language, it's so much more complicated than many of the other passages, and it's because you can tell this guy's educated, and the way he argues and the way he thinks, it's harder to translate. And you feel it. Paul has this intellect and this understanding. He's compelling, he can speak, he's forceful, he has charisma, and people do what Paul says. People follow Paul. They're like, this is the guy, he knows the way. Like, this is what it is. And then there's this other guy, his name's Apollos. We learn about Apollos in the book of Acts, chapter 18. And it says that he was great at debate. He was great at argument. He spoke He spoke boldly in the synagogues. He helped people come to Jesus through persuasion and argument, and candid talking about these things was really smart and compelling. And people would look at Apollos and go, well, he has charisma, and he speaks straightforwardly, and he seems to know the way. And these are two loud voices in the first century where people are like, that's my guy. I get behind him. I want to do what he's doing. I'm going to follow him. And somebody else will go, no, I'm not in his camp. I'm in this camp, and I want to follow him. And it's actually creating division in the church because people are being influenced by influencers. And here's what Paul says about it, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4. For when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, and he's writing this to a church. I love this. He goes, are you not merely being human? See, that's what we just said, isn't it? There's something about being a human being where we all will emulate somebody else. We're all doing that at some point in time. Your last moment of genuine individuality was when you walked out of your room at 4 years old in mismatched outfits saying, I love this. And your parents were like, you can't leave the house though. Like that was it. And ever since then, we've all been kind of emulating somebody or someone else along the way we do this. And that's what Paul's saying. He says, for when one says, I follow Paul, and another, I follow Apollos, are you not being merely human? What then is Apollos? He asks. What is Paul? And then he answers his own question. Servants through whom you believed is the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. Verse 7, so neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. This is Paul saying, look guys, I'm just a guy trying to do what I think God has called me to do because I think it's changed my life and is worth the mission of my life. And I want that same thing for you. And Apollos is trying to do the same thing. So don't mistake us for Jesus. Don't mistake us for what God is actually doing and who God actually is in your life. When I was in college, I attended a conference where a bunch of pastors and speakers came and talked to a group of us. And we were all a whole group of people wanting to go into full-time ministry at some point. Some people wanted to go be like overseas workers, and some people wanted to work in churches and all kinds of different things all the time. And they brought in all these speakers. A friend that I was sitting next to that day, he'd had his life changed, as he would articulate. He told me this. He's like, my life was changed because of this book I read, and it was written by a pastor who was speaking at this conference. And he said, I read this book, and it turned my faith upside down. It opened my eyes to so many things, and I just started to experience God in ways that I hadn't before, and I realized this is worth my life, and this is what I want to do. And so much so, he said, it changed my faith, it transformed my heart, and now I want to be a pastor. I want to go be a leader, a Christian who's leading people just like this guy is doing. That's what I want to do with my life. So this person spoke, and it was good, and it ended, and then we were walking through the hallway, and there's this pastor, and he's standing in the hallway over there, and I'm with my friend, and I'm like, you should go say hi to that guy. And he's like, I can't say hi to him. And I was like, just go say hi and push him over there, right? And he goes, and now he's standing there, and he's like, I just want to say thank you. Like, I read your book and the ministry that you have, and it's been such an impact on my life. And he goes, you have literally transformed my life. You have transformed my faith. You've transformed my heart. And he goes, I'm actually trying to go into full-time ministry because I want to be like you. I want to do what you're doing in the world. And this pastor looks at him, and he just smiles at him. He goes, that's really encouraging. Thank you for being encouraging, and thank you for, and he goes, and I'm so glad that God has been moving and working in your life. And he goes, but I think you have me confused with Jesus. I'll never forget this moment where I was just standing there, and my friend suddenly like stepped back and just looked at him, and he was like, huh. And then this pastor quoted 1 Corinthians 3 or referenced it. And I didn't even know it at the time. It wasn't until later that I went and read this. And I'm like, this is exactly what he was referencing. And he said, don't copy the servant when you can emulate the king. And my friend just took that. And I've remembered this forever. There's just a piece of this where I'm like, yeah, because the person I want my life to look like, who I want my heart to be like, what I want is actually Jesus. It's actually the point. He's actually the thing. And I love that. See, we live in a world where people follow and emulate influencers. It's not bad. Like, we all follow people, and we all buy things, and we spend money, and we're influenced by others, and that's normal. It's part of being human. It's not a bad thing, but we do this where we follow influencers, and we spend our time and our money and energy trying to copy the thing that person is doing. We try to emulate that person. Or we live in a world that's currently dominated by politics or political voices or this kind of commentary, and we follow that and we copy that, and it starts to become us. We start to speak and talk and act in that same way because we pattern our lives after that thing. We emulate it. Or we live in a world where people follow celebrity worship artists and church leaders. And I recognize the irony of me even being a pastor talking about this, right? And we seek to emulate them and to be like them because they know the way. Maybe they have a strong voice and they're like, because this is what you ought to be doing and this is the way. Or maybe it's because they're compelling or whatever the thing. But we find ourselves copying those things and we emulate this because that's what human beings do. We all do this. But here's the truth. The influencer of today will be forgotten tomorrow. And today's trends will be tomorrow's old news. It's true. If you don't believe me, have kids, have teenagers in your house, and quote a movie you loved that you thought was really fun when you were younger and watch them look at you and just be like, that's lame and it doesn't matter. Right? Because it's not the same thing. It goes away. The influencer of today will be forgotten tomorrow. Today's trends will be tomorrow's old news. And here's another truth. Neither the Democratic Party nor the Republican Party are the hope of the world. They're just not. They're not the thing that ultimately this is the answer for the church, because Jesus is. And even the popular church leader of today will eventually be forgotten tomorrow as history continues to move forward. And if you're like, but really though? Yeah. How many of you are like, who's Apollos? I didn't know anything about that dude before today. That's okay, right? And he's in the book of Acts. He's in the book of 1 Corinthians. Like, we even have a good shot of knowing about him, but he was incredibly influential. But he's become forgotten along the pages of history because this is how life begins to work. Things move, trends get lost, people get forgotten. But for the last 2,000 years, we have been speaking the name of Jesus. For the last 2,000 years, people have been choosing to follow Jesus, to emulate Jesus, to place the weight of their faith and trust in Jesus, to allow Jesus to become that which transforms their heart and life and make a difference in their world and the world around them. For the last 2,000 years, people have been choosing to embrace the love of Jesus for themselves in a way that they look around and realize they have brothers and sisters that they didn't even realize they had. For 2,000 years, people have been aligning their lives and hearts to follow Jesus in ways that isn't forgotten, but keeps living, keeps being vibrant, and it is the very reason why any of you are sitting in this place today. The name of Jesus, who he is, how he is, what he is so incredibly compelling and powerful that it continues to move in us and through us generation after generation. And it's not tomorrow's old news, friends. And if you think about leading a church of the future, the question that I have is, who will it look like? Who will we emulate? Who will it be? To the young people gathered here today, my question to you, and I actually would love to ask this to every person in the room, is who are you following right now? Think about that. Who are you patterning your life after right now? Will you be patterning your life that same way tomorrow? Does it stand the test of time? Does it reach into the depths of your life and meet you in the core of who you are and pour out love and grace and forgiveness and wholeness like Jesus? I have a belief that there's only one person worth patterning your life after to this degree, and that's Jesus Christ. And the reason I share this with you is because we live in an era right now, and if I'm really honest, where when I think about Christianity, it keeps taking on the flavor of celebritydom, or it keeps taking on the flavor of politic. And oftentimes it feels like the church is being made in its image and losing the image of the most compelling being in the entire world, the person who reaches into our very existence and actually changes us, actually moves in us, actually loves us. And it's Jesus. And so every one of us, but especially a future generation, has a very critical question to ask at some time, and it's, who will we follow? Who do we actually want to model our lives, our hearts, our being after? Because it will become the gift you give away in 20 to 30 years. And the path and the things you choose right now become the blessing and the hope for the world to come. Younger people, you matter. Because this is your choice. This is yours to choose and yours to live and yours to hold, and not with pressure and obligation, but to bring beauty and life through your life to a world who needs it. Second thing, the future church needs a younger generation of people who are willing to try and fail even if they are afraid. I'll say that again. Future church needs a generation of people, younger generation of people who are willing to try and to fail, even if they are afraid. And I'm gonna be really honest with you. And part of why I wanna be honest with you is because I think when I said the phrase I just said, many of us are gonna convert it in our heads to what I originally was gonna say. Here's what I was originally gonna say, and I realized this isn't right, I shouldn't say it this way. But I think we're gonna convert it to that anyway, and it's this. The church needs a younger generation who isn't afraid to try and fail. That's what I originally had. And I just thought, after I looked at it, I was like, well, that's garbage. When was the last time somebody looked at you and you were really afraid and they were like, stop it, don't be afraid. And you were like, thanks, chief, that worked. Right? It doesn't work. It's not how this works. Here's what it does. If it's like, I'm really afraid, and you're like, well, you shouldn't be. Okay, cool. I just learned I need to hide around you. I just learned I need to pretend around you. I just learned I need to mask where I really am and what I'm really feeling and pretend like everything's fine. I need to fracture that part of myself in a way where now I experience more anxiety and more depression and more fear because I got nowhere to take it. And what I suddenly realized is this is what we often do with the younger generation. And so I just want to tell you, I'm not asking you to not be afraid. The truth of the matter is you will be afraid. You will. You'll be afraid to try something and you'll be afraid to fail at times. And that's normal. And it's especially normal for younger generations. You know, when they survey generations right now, one of the most statistically significant things that starts to come out when you look at Gen Z and the millennial generation is a pronounced fear of failure. More so than any other generation. For Gen Z, it's actually 10 percentage points above even the millennial generation, who was already 10 percentage points above Generation X, who was like 15 to 20 percentage points or something like that above the boomer generation. And so when you look, one of the most distinguishing fears, one of the most distinguishing struggles of younger generations right now is, but what if I try and what if I fail? And it's a real thing. It's a deep struggle. And rather than me look at it and say, you should just stop that or just don't be afraid and try harder because we need that, that's just a recipe to say thank you for your irrelevance if I said that to you. The truth is you will find yourself afraid, and I think you come by it honestly. Because when you grow up and where social media is your norm and where all of the people capturing videos and photos and different things and comparing those things and sound blasts on the internet is your norm, what you grow up realizing is that, well, this isn't actually a very safe place because even a small thing I do can be blown up to a giant thing in that space. Even a private thing I do can become public in a way that isn't safe. And even a little failure that might have just been mine now becomes something that other people get to know and comment on and give their feedback about. And it can be really hard. It can build a thing in you that says, I'm scared to fail. I don't even know if I want to try. And younger generations face that. When you grow up with parents who insist that you do better than they did and that you don't have the same struggles that they do because they want to raise you the right way, quote unquote, that's a really beautiful sentiment, but also make you afraid to fail, won't it? And every generation feels a little bit of this and goes through a little bit of this. Or what about this? When you grow up with COVID crashing down into the midst of your education, and you look around at the world around you for stability, and you see political craziness and people shouting at each other and saying all kinds of stuff, and you experience cancel culture where it feels like one person does the wrong thing and immediately everything they do is gone and they're no longer allowed to be a person in the same space or the same way or those things anymore. You suddenly go, I just feel like in this world, it could blow up at any point in time and I don't want to be the one who blows it up. I don't want to be the one who fails at something. I don't want to be the one who gets canceled at something. So I'm a little bit nervous about stepping out, and younger generations feel this. I sat talking with a young guy over lunch a bit ago, I think it was like a month ago, and he looked at me and he just said, Ryan, I don't know what's worse. The idea that I'm gonna try something and fail and be a failure, or that out of my fear of failure, I'm not gonna try anything at all and I'll just avoid it and I'll just fail at life and end up being a failure anyway. He goes, either way, I'm a failure. I was like, wow, that was a lot of weight in one sentence, wasn't it? That was a lot of struggle in one sentence, but that's real. That's actually how many people feel. That's how many people even in this room right now at times feel. And it's in light of that very real fear that I want to tell everyone in this room, but especially younger generations, one of the most important things I could possibly teach you about Christianity. And I mean this. I'm not trying to blow this up. I really think this is one of the most important things I could possibly teach any of us, especially younger generations, about Christianity. Because when you hold this, it is one of the distinguishing characteristics of what it means to follow and know Jesus. And when you let go of this, you start to look like everything else around you. And here it is. It is this: your worth, your value, and your identity are anchored in Christ and not the things you do. I can't begin to tell you how big of a deal this is. I'll say it again. Your worth, your value, and your identity are anchored in Christ and not the things that you do. This is so important for every generation. I want you to consider this. This all is going to come straight out of the Bible. We're going to get to a moment in Romans in just a sec where Paul talks about this. But think of these larger truths. Friends, you are made in the image of God, which means you have innate worth and value simply because of who created you and whose image you bear. You're walking around as the very image bearer of the God of the universe, created with worth and value. And if you're ever struggling with, but am I worthy and do I have value? And is this really true? You are worth the life and the death of the God of the universe himself, of Jesus. There is no greater worth a person could bestow upon you than to say, you are worth my life. That's how valuable you are. That's how much worth you hold. That's what's anchored you. You are worth that. And it's not because of what you have done or haven't done. It's because of who he sees you to be and how he knows you. It is anchored in you, fixed in you, because it's fixed in Jesus, because this is true of God for you. It's held there. There is no greater love that could be bestowed upon you. God made you. He knows you. He knit you together in your mother's womb. Your identity isn't based on the opinions and subjectivity of others. It is anchored in the God who loved you into being itself. It is not at risk or at stake, depending on the next moment of success or failure. It's anchored in Christ, with Christ. This is one of the most unique things, most important things that I think we hold in Christianity because of what it does in our life. Because here is why this matters, friends. Because if your worth and your value and your identity are determined by what you do or by the thoughts and the opinions of others, then those opinions and those people and those moments of success or failure will be more powerful than God himself in your life. Because you will endlessly be running towards them for their approval, for their understanding, for their sense of worth and value to come back towards you. You will either hide from failure to avoid their rejection, or compete and contend to succeed and prove that you are worthy. And all of that will be driven by the fear of what if I fail and I'm actually not enough. And if you look around you, maybe you've been on this journey and you feel it, and you're like, it's exhausting, and it's like a hamster wheel I can't get out of. Or if you look around you and you see people running in that trajectory and in those directions, you just see it's like just a thing that never ends, and people are fatigued and always trying to find the next thing to make them worthy, to make them valuable, to make them whole, to make them good. But when you know that it's fixed in Christ, it becomes something powerful. Romans chapter 8, Paul writes this. I love this passage, verse 31. He says, if God is for us, who can be against us? He did not spare his own son, but gave us, this is that value statement, right? He did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. So how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? He values you that much. It is fixed with him. That's the statement. Or what about the moments where people are like, but what about the opinions of others? What about what they say about you? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It's God who justifies. Because whose opinion's held and fixed and matters? It's God's. Verse 34, who is to condemn? Who's going to point the finger? Who's there to tell you that you are a failure, that you were wrong, that this was terrible? Christ Jesus is the one who died. More than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. He did the work and is doing the work. It sits with him fixed at the very right hand of God. Verse 35, who? So who? If all that's true, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, all the crazy things that happen in the world around us? No. Or distress, all the worries and anxieties and things we carry? No. Or persecution, all the things that people have against us? No. Or famine, all the things in this world that we can't control? No. Or nakedness, our shame and our sense of struggle of worth? No. Our danger or sword, things we're afraid of? No. And then he ends this passage, jump down to Romans 8:38, which is one of the most quoted passages I hear a lot. It's this: for I am sure, this is how he ends his passage. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, and that's the powers of this world is how that's translated, nor height, nor depth. And in case we want to argue with Paul, but what about, he says, nor anything else in all of creation, none of it will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus, because who's holding it? Who holds you? Who holds your worth and your value? Who holds your identity? Who holds all of that stuff? Where is it fixed? It's with him. And nothing can separate you from the love of God. You see, friends, when you let Christ hold your worth and value, you're still going to be afraid at times. But this time, instead of holding back and going, I don't want to try, or I don't want to step into that because if I fail, I become a failure. This time it's different. Because now what you get to say, well, I'm still afraid because that's just part of being a human, but stepping into this now, I have permission to try. And even if I fail, I'm not a failure. My identity is fixed with him. My worth, my value is fixed with him. It means I get to learn and I get to grow and I get to become a person more and more with every passing day. This is why this is so important. It's why it's such a gift. Guys, I became a student ministry intern here when I was 18 years old at Casas. I grew up at Casas, and I went through a period of time where I had, 7 months to a year or something like that, where I said, I think I'm going to be an atheist because I was really struggling, and then I was just a really bad atheist. I kept talking to God and just couldn't do it. I really tried. I'm being sincere, and I just wasn't great at it. And so I decided I should be an honest person. And so I came back to faith, and I had all these questions, and I started trying to read my Bible, because if I was going to follow this, I at least wanted to know what's real that I can stand in, and what do I care about that I can do, and I just started reading and trying to absorb all of that. And I remember I didn't know what to do, so I called my old youth pastor, Phil, and he said, why don't you meet with me? We can go through some books and talk through some stuff, and also, Ryan, you have leadership in you, so why don't you start interning here at Casas? And I started, and I just thought, wasn't that a beautiful thing Phil did? It was a beautiful thing that an older generation did for me. I was a disaster. I really was. I was not a great intern. They asked me to leave after that year. They were like, you should go to another church. That's not a good sign, just putting that out there. It's not. I learned a bit. I learned about how to, lead a youth ministry, and I learned a bunch of things. They put me in charge of the Mexico trip, taking a bunch of high school students that I was only 1 year older than to Mexico with a bunch of volunteers and people, and I didn't even know how to spell the word liability. And I just did all of this and made a ton of mistakes, and I had volunteers get mad at me, and I had kids get confused by me, and I failed so many times. They asked me to try teaching at one point in time, and so I decided to teach in the middle school ministry. That was where they were like, you should teach here. And I said, okay. I remember the very first day I went to teach, I taught on, Joseph and the coat of many colors, and I basically said to, stood up, and if you don't know that story very well, here's what I said. There's a guy named Potiphar in the story, and I said, Potiphar, he's the Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, the most powerful person in the land. He's not. That's completely not true. And then I made points about what that means for your life in the story and different things, which were relevant because it wasn't really true. And then I also said, at one point I referenced the New Testament. I was like, and Judas from the New Testament, who betrays Jesus, that's Jesus' brother. And so think about that. And I said some things about that. It's not true, by the way. Don't get confused. That's not true. That's false. And I said that, and then I made a bunch of applications about that. And it was all wrong. It was just not true at all. It's not even in the text. It's not even what it says. It's crazy. I said this to a bunch of middle schoolers as an 18-year-old teaching. And I remember when I was done, everybody was just looking at me who knew anything, and they were just like, uh-oh, this is not go good. And I was just like, oh man, I failed. And I waited to talk to the youth pastor, about this. And he came to me, and I remember sitting in his office, and I had this conversation. He said, Ryan, you're good at talking with people, and when you talk with people, it feels like they're willing to listen to you. And that's really good. So you should probably make sure that what you have to say is actually true. And you laugh like that's a sarcastic joke. That was one of the most important things that somebody ever said to me as a young leader growing up around here. And it's because it was one of the very first moments in my embarrassment and of me failing and just struggling and wondering what this was going to be. It was one of the very first moments that I ever found myself thinking, what I say is more important than how I say it. And what I stand in is more important than how I'm perceived. And I need to own this. It was part of that conversation that led me at some point in time to say, I need to go study the Bible. I need to understand some of these pieces and give it time and energy and things. It was through failure that I got to learn a lesson. And you know what I love? He didn't look at me in that moment and be like, you failure, how dare you, never again. He looked and he just smiled and he was like, it's okay, it's your first time, but maybe we can spend some more time. We'll study the scriptures together next time. We'll go through it together. We'll learn some things. We'll talk about this and you'll grow and you'll learn. And he created space for me. So I went off to college and I got a Bible degree and I studied theology and I studied a bunch of different things. I even studied Greek and the original language and all this stuff because I'm going to learn how to teach people because I'm not going to fail like that again. And so I got hired, I think at 25 around here, to be a youth pastor again. Now I'm back. I'm not an intern and I'm not the guy who didn't know anything. Now I know some things and I got an office and it's got smart books on it and people can see that and I have a degree and I got this stuff and I'm gonna teach now because I know how to teach. I know how to write a sermon. I took classes. I got graded on all this. Like I know how to do it. And I showed up for the very first day going like, I have learned, I have grown. I've learned from my failures. Like, let's do this. And then they're like, cool, you're a pastor now. And I didn't know what that was. I'd taken classes and different things, but guys, it's really weird. I got hired and they're like, here's your office. And I said, cool, thanks. And then they left. And I just sat in there going, cool, I'm going to pastor now. Like I didn't know what to do. And so I just thought, what does a pastor do? He loves people. So I called volunteers and I called workers and people and things and I set up meetings with them and I had conversations and I said, what do you care about? What do you want me to know about? And I just want to be here and get to know you. And that was great. And then I called leaders and student leaders and set up a meeting. And then I researched games and things for a program for students. And then I looked up talk ideas and I worked on my message for that week. And I thought about camps and things. And when that day was over, I had to come back to work the next day. And I'd already done everything that I thought a pastor did the day before. And now I still didn't know what to do. And I'm embarrassed to tell you this. So you know what I did? I just pulled a book out that I thought I should read, and I would sit in my office reading a book, pretending like I knew what I was doing, afraid of failing, waiting for someone to walk in and find me out. And I just kept showing up and kept being really weird and really afraid and stepping out and trying things. And eventually over time, I learned how to fill my schedule. And eventually over time, I learned what a pastor does around here. And I showed up to meetings and I did things. And now I just daydream about the days when I could sit in my office reading a book sometimes. Because you just learn through failure. You learn by showing up. I look at my life now and what I've started to realize is, wow, it's not all the successes. I kind of think what life has been is just stepping into the moments God has for me and failing in ever greater measure. And in each of those moments, he just keeps teaching me and growing me and learning. And the gift that we get to give away to a younger generation is to say, you have that same space here too. You get to be that same thing. So invest your life. Invest your heart. You want to run a small group? Talk to us. You want to be a part of something? Talk to us. You want to join something? Do something? Let this place be a training ground for you where you get to follow God's leading in your own heart and become the person that he's leading and guiding you to be. And when you fail, because there will come a moment where you fail, there will come a moment where you struggle, here's what you can know. You will have a church who gather around you, who look at you and say, your worth and your value and your identity are fixed in Jesus Christ. And so yes, you failed, but this just means it's a chance to learn and grow. So try again and keep failing with greater courage as you face your fear. We love you and we are so thankful to the younger generation that you are here. And I'm excited to see what a church in 30 years looks like because of you.